Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tradition Kitchens, Pasta and Sauce with Chris. We are so excited to have all of you. My name is Julia, and I started Tradition Kitchens with my mom about 2 years ago. And what started out as in-person classes have become online with a global community. So as you're joining, we really encourage you to turn on video so that we can see each other as we're cooking and learning together. We also want to meet you. So in the chat, please let us know where you're dialing in from. When some of you RSVP'd, we had people from all around the world. So I know we're expecting Australia and New York, and I see New Orleans. Just feel free to let us know in the chat where you're calling in from. So we've got San Diego and Boston and Hawaii. Amazing.
Why am I
Keep
hearing stuff?
letting us know where you're calling in from, but do stay on mute so that we don't hear you. And whoever is wondering if we can hear you, we can. All right, we have a fun tradition at Tradition Kitchens where we like to do a kitchen cam to do a spotlight on a few folks before we officially get started with the cooking. So I'm gonna take a look on gallery view. So if you're new to Zoom, on the top right, you can select speaker. So you see the person who's actually talking, or you can have gallery, which is a really cool Brady Bunch view where you can see everyone who is on the call. So it's great to see some faces. Carolyn, coming to you, Carolyn P, if you wanna unmute, we're going to spotlight you for everyone and tell us where you are calling in from.
I'm in Vero Beach, Florida.
Wonderful. Are you cooking along with us?
I am. Fingers crossed.
I'm sure it will be awesome. I love it. You've got the headphones and a very cool apron. Is there a story behind your apron?
It's just a peacock.
It's a lovely peacock. I like it.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be checking back in with you. Thanks for saying hi. Don't forget to go back on mute. And I'm going to go back to gallery view and take a look. I see a whole family together with David D. So we're coming at you for intros. If you all want to come closer, spotlight. Woo! Hello, who are all of you? Would you mind unmuting and introducing yourselves?
Well, hello. Here, let me close this. So my name's David. We're in Maryland right now. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you great.
Okay, cool. And most of these people just wandered in. I don't know them. No, no, we've got two families here. We have our family. We've got Peter, my wife Nancy, and myself. And then we have our friends and Mike, the No Frios, Mike, and Marco back here. I don't know if you can see everyone. There we go.
Yeah.
So we are all going to cook some pasta.
This is awesome. Thanks for joining us and having a great crew. We're excited to see how it goes. Awesome. All right, I'm going to remove the spotlight. Don't forget to go back on mute. And I think we have time for 1 or 2 more quick kitchen cam intros. If anybody wants to say hello in particular, feel free to raise your hand or let me know in the chat. If you haven't had a chance to introduce yourself, please do so. We've got Tasmania, Australia, which is so cool. We have a global crowd here today. Let's see. I'm looking on Zoom to see Vanessa. We're coming at you. Do you want to introduce yourself and say hello?
Hi, I'm Vanessa. I'm calling from Melbourne in Australia. I'm not cooking along because I'm working because it's 10 a.m. So I'm going to be watching and making this later.
I love it. Well, thanks for working along with us. What part of Australia did you say you're from?
In Melbourne. So we're in lockdown at the moment. So yeah.
All right. Well, we're thinking of you all, and we have an amazing chef named Rosh who's been teaching with us live from Melbourne. So she's been keeping us posted on all the adventures there. So stay safe and thanks for being here with us.
Great.
All right. We are going to have one more intro. I see Heidi and family, and I'm very excited to spotlight all of you. Hello.
Hello. I have my helpers.
It's great to see you all again. Everyone, Heidi taught an amazing class with her family. Do you want to tell us what you taught back in December?
Sure, we had so much fun teaching a Tradition Kitchens class on how to make gluten-free Chanukah potato latkes. Although you can eat them anytime, not just for Chanukah. We like to make them, actually we've been making them with zucchini because our garden is busting right now. So latkes for any time of year really, but gluten-free ones, because I know there's a lot of people that need that. And my mom included. And we also made shakshuka.
It was amazing. It was such a highlight. Well, it's great to see you again.
Nice to see you. We're looking forward to cooking together. We got our aprons. We're going to cook along.
Yes, I love it. I love it. All right. See you soon. Okay, we are ready to get started. I hope everyone is excited. We have one more tradition before we officially kick off, and that is the Zoom selfie. So I'm going to invite everyone to turn on your cameras on the bottom left so that we can all see each other and have a wonderful moment to remember this exciting class with Chris and people from around the world who will become our friends at the end of class. So I see Phoenix waving at us. Hello, Phoenix. Will, come on camera. Hi, Gwen, Tessa, Nancy, Nate. I'm just going to call out a few people, but I won't call out all 118 of you. But we'd love to see more of you on video. It really helps connect us with each other. I'm seeing a great group. So I'm going to give us a countdown. Everyone look at your camera and we're going to do 3, 2, 1. And one more, just in case, anyone closed their eyes. This is so cute to see everyone. Erica, turn your camera this way. You're sideways. Okay, much better. 3, 2, 1. Perfect. All right. Keep your cameras on. We'd love to continue to get to know all of you throughout class. So welcome. If you haven't shared in the chat where you are dialing in from, please do so. We would love to know where all of our callers are from. It's been great to see so far. I'm Julia. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. And together with my mom, about 2 years ago, we started Tradition Kitchens to build community and learn about cultural foods and the people who make them. And it has been such a joy for us to meet many more people from around the world during this time. And we have had classes ranging from Heidi and her family teaching to others like Rosh, who's one of our teachers who comes back every month now and teaches us live from Melbourne. And it's really about building community and cooking like you are in your neighbor's kitchen. So if there are questions, please put them in the chat. We will do our best to get to everyone's questions, but please know we want to keep going and not delay the learning too much. We will probably spotlight you at some point if you want to raise your hand, but be patient with us because we want to make sure that we can have everyone who's cooking along follow as we go, or those who want to take notes for the future and watch, that is most welcome. And we're so glad to see everybody letting us know. We will send the recipe afterwards, but part of the fun is watching Chris do it live and teaching us. So you have all the ingredients, which I'll put in chat in a moment. And I'm really excited to turn it over to Chris in 1 minute, who will be teaching us. I first just want to give a spotlight to his mom, Dina, to thank her for being here and give her a shout out. So hi, Dina.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Julia.
Thanks
Hello,
for being here. We're so excited and appreciate all the culinary gifts you gave to Chris. So thank you. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris. As you all know from his bio, he is a recent culinary school graduate and is an amazing chef and teacher. He has made everything from nut butters to pastas and so many other cool dishes in between. I'm going to share his Instagrams throughout the chat so you can follow along his foodie adventures. So Chris, I'm going to spotlight you. Thank you so much for teaching with us. So excited to learn from you live from San Francisco. So take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Julia. Appreciate the introduction and welcome everybody from around the world. Glad you could join to make some pasta with me. If you haven't read the bio, I'll just give you a brief introduction. I'm originally from Delaware. I've made my way across the country. I now live in San Francisco. I've been here for about 5.5 years. As Julia mentioned, I just recently graduated culinary school. It's something that I've wanted to do since I was about 14 years old when I first worked in a sub shop. That really kicked off my love of food. I cooked for myself and friends and family for the longest time. Never went to culinary school because I don't want to be a chef and I don't want to work in a restaurant. And so I thought I didn't want to spend the money if I wasn't going to use it in a professional sense. But I got to the point where it's been a dream of mine and I just wanted to go, and the education can never be taken away from me. It was a fantastic experience. Now I'm actually doing my externship. I have 240 hours to complete. So I'm done with the classwork and I'm externing at a restaurant called Aquarello in San Francisco. It's a fine dining Italian restaurant. It's got 2 Michelin stars and it's quite an experience, and I'm learning a ton from the chef there. And as Julie mentioned, I've owned a nut butter company, so I've been involved with food for a while. I stopped that a couple of years ago and turned it into a pasta club with my friends that I'll talk about later as we get going. So yeah, that's kind of my history. Similar to what Julie said about Tradition Kitchens, I love cooking for other people, friends and family. It's about connection and community and staying in touch with the people that I care about the most. Cool. So why don't we talk about what we'll be doing today? Just a brief rundown. We'll kind of do it by segments. We will start with the pasta dough. We will make the dough ball, and then as that's resting, that needs to rest about 15 or 20 minutes, then we can flip over to make the 2 sauces. We're going to make a pretty simple, basic marinara sauce that comes together very quickly, but is delicious. And then while that's simmering, we're going to make the pesto. Once we get those 2 sauces done, then we'll come back and we'll shape a couple pastas. We've got computi, which is kind of like pea pods. We have cavatelli, which is kind of like hot dog buns. And then lorigitas, which is one of my, if not the favorite pasta shape, which is kind of like braided wreaths. They're fun, a little bit time consuming, but we'll make all 3 of those shapes and maybe 1 or 2 more. But I tried to keep the shapes pretty simple in terms of stuff you could use your hands and no machines. Everything today is pretty much just flour and water for the pasta. But there's a lot of different varieties you can do that we'll talk through. So if we're ready to get going, we can start. So the first thing, if this is going to be for the pesto sauce, but if you're cooking along, if you have walnuts or pine nuts for the pesto, let's get them in the oven, set it to about 250 degrees and just spread the nuts on a tray and pop them in. I'm using pine nuts, but you really can use a variety of nuts for pesto. I think pine nuts taste the best, but I've also done walnuts, I've done pistachio, I've done almonds. So we're just toasting these. So you can throw them right in the oven as soon as you get it on, and you're really just going for smell. When you're toasting nuts, you really want to go low and slow in comparison to when you toast spices. You toast spices in a pan, really high heat for a very short amount of time, but toasting nuts in the oven, low temperature, and for a long time. So you really just want to go until they're fragrant. If you want to set a timer for about 15 minutes, we can check them when they're done. A little bit of color, and really just let your nose be the guide. Okay, so if we want to start making pasta, I've got the recipe today with 2 types of flour. There's 170 grams of semolina flour, which is also called durum flour. This is a little bit coarser, it's yellow. And then 170 grams of either all-purpose flour, or I use 00 flour, which is really just a finer ground flour. It has less protein as well, and less gluten. I like this combination. It's pretty simple, so it just uses the 2 flours. And then as you're thinking about it, it's really just a 2-to-1 flour to liquid measurement. 170 grams of each of the flours, and then 175 grams of water. A lot about pastas feel. You don't want the dough to be too sticky. You don't want it to be too dry, but you can always play with it. You can always add a little bit more flour. You can always add a little bit more water. So the first thing we would do is just mix the 2 flours together in a bowl just to get them well incorporated. And one of the things about pasta, about this one, if you weren't able to find the 2 doughs, or you can't find semolina, or you only have all-purpose, you can make it with all semolina. You can make it with all-purpose, doesn't really matter. I like the semolina, the texture that it gives when you mix them together. But I've experimented with all of these doughs, and I suggest you do the same. Just try out different flours. You can use wheat flour. You can also use gluten-free. I know somebody talked about gluten-free out there. It's a little tougher to work with, but Cup for Cup is a good brand. I think King Arthur has a good substitute for all-purpose that you can use as well. I'm going to work on my countertop. I have a nice wooden countertop that kind of is like a cutting board. You can also work in a bowl if you want, but I will put it up in this camera just to kind of show you what we're doing. If you don't want to make a mess, or if you want to just use a cutting board, you can also do that. One of the things they taught us in culinary school was to minimize the space you need that you use. So I try to be compact, but when you have a kitchen and you're hosting a class, I can use as much space as I want. Okay, so what you're going to do, whether you're working on the surface or in a bowl, is you want to kind of get it in a mound, in a circular mound, and then you will take your hand and touch your thumb to your other fingers. So just kind of making like a little point. And you're going to basically make a volcano mound. And you're going to stick it right in the middle, and then you're just going to go in a circle, in an even circle, to try and create walls and to create this crater. It looks like a volcano. Hopefully you can all see from the top view.
Yeah, let me pin the top view. And Chris, we have some people, I think, who are still mixing the flour and the water together. Any advice as they are doing that?
Now, I think, just a fork works really well. Just combining both flours in a bowl. You can also use your hands. It's a weird thing for me. I love the feel of flour on my hands. So as much as I can work with my hands as possible, I do that. There's the view up top.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick whisk or with a fork. It doesn't need to be super well incorporated, because as we need it, that will also incorporate the flours together. It's not crazy important that, you're not looking for anything certain.
And what about the people who are food processor fans or KitchenAid mixer people?
Yes, that is it. They can also do that as well. I've done it in a food processor. I learned that in culinary school. I never made pasta, but you can use it with the blade of the food processor, and you can just mix the flours together, incorporate them, pulse them a few times, and then you would want to add in your water and let it run until it forms a dough ball. And once it kind of gets into something cohesive, you can take it out of there, and then you would still knead it. The KitchenAid works well. I have a KitchenAid. I typically use that for when I'm time constrained or I have a lot of pasta to make. It's very efficient and very good. Similar, you would just you would use the paddle attachment. You could also use the dough hook, but you would add the flour in there, give it a quick mix, and then add the water, and then turn the KitchenAid mixer on like low to medium and let it do its thing until it's all formed. And similarly, when you're using those two, one of those things, if people are going to be using the machines, one thing I'll say, and I'll say it here for when we're making it by hand too, I always reserve a little bit of liquid back. I will not use the full 175 grams here. A lot of pasta is about feel, and you can always add more, but you can never take any out. So, if you do end up using it all and if it looks a little too wet and it's really sticky, you can add a little bit more flour in there. But I usually like to withhold some liquid until I get a feel for and a good sense of how the dough ball is going to take.
Awesome. And we're just going to wait one more minute for people to catch up with you. A quick question about substitutes. Have you ever tried fine corn flour?
I have not tried corn flour.
Okay. If you are trying that, let us know how it goes.
Yes.
Let's see who asked that, Alexis. And then Phoenix wants to know, do you add salt at this stage?
I do not add salt. That's a great question. So a lot of recipes do call for salt in the dough. I heavily salt my water, which we'll do later, and then salt the sauces, and then finish with salt. So that's kind of the salt process I like to take. But there's nothing wrong if you'd like to add a pinch of salt, maybe a quarter teaspoon, that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So just a quick recap. What do you have in your dough here? And then let's keep going and we'll catch up with other people.
Yes. So just as a recap, this was a mix of 170 grams of semolina flour and 170 grams of 00 or all-purpose flour that were just we incorporated together in a mixer. Sorry, that was my oven for the nuts. In a mixer, incorporating it in a bowl with a fork. And then we're going to be adding 175 grams of water to this to make the dough ball. And just another note while people are catching up, if you want any color to this dough will turn out pretty white, a little bit kind of like eggshellish. You get a little bit of a color from the semolina, but if you've seen Instagram or pictures out there, you're curious whether you've seen like orange or blue or purple or green pasta. That's really easy to do. It's usually just a typical, like if you want to make this flour yellow, you can add a little bit of turmeric powder to it. If you want to add green to it, you could blanch some spinach or blanch some herbs and then pulse them in with the water. So you're adding a green liquid. Spirulina powder can also give it some blue color, or purple there's out there. There's a lot of different powders out there that you can add to this to give it some color if you want to really impress some people.
Cool. And last question, people just want to check, there's no eggs in this recipe.
There are not. I chose this one for ease, really. It's a really good intro dough with no eggs. Also, what I've come to find for pasta that is not stuffed, I typically go with a dough that just has water. I typically reserve egg dough for pastas that's going to be stuffed, so ravioli or those types of things. The eggs are absolutely fine to do. Another reason I did this is it freezes and it stores very nicely. When you add egg to it, you have a shorter shelf life with what you can do. I actually have some Lorditas that I made back in March that are still in my pantry. That are still good because it's just flour and water, so that they last a lot longer. And I also find that this dough works better for hand shaping. Egg dough is really good when you roll it. It's also really good rolled through a pasta machine, which I didn't know if everyone would have that equipment, so felt like I was just going to keep it relatively straightforward with this one. But egg dough, there's a lot of different types you can use. You can use a combination of eggs and egg yolks. You can use all egg yolks. That's a very rich dough. You can use, as I mentioned, different flours and make it gluten-free. And that's part of the fun that I think is with pasta, is you can experiment and it'll still taste good no matter what. All
right, let's keep going. This is awesome.
All right.
It's time for the water now.
Yes. So just to recap, if you get it in a little bit of a mound on your surface wherever you're working, or if you're in a machine, you can go ahead and add the liquid. But for the hand, just you can do this with a spoon too. But like I said, I like using my hands. You just kind of want to like form a little beak with your hand, and you make this circle, making it look like the crater of a volcano. That's the space where you're going to put the liquid. So we can do that now. As I mentioned, this is 175 grams of water. I'm going to reserve just a little bit back. I don't have a measurement for but I'm going to use 95% of this water. And you just go pour it right in the middle, and the walls of the flour are going to keep that contained. So I don't know if you can see, but just a splash of water that I didn't use. Okay, if you're using a machine, you can just turn it on low. If you're using a food processor, go ahead and turn it on. You're really just looking for it to form a ball. It shouldn't be too sticky. If it is sticky, add a little bit more flour and let it go. It should be really smooth. The end product that we're going to be looking for is a very smooth dough ball. So if you're using the hand and well method, whether work surface or in a bowl, it's best to just use a fork. And essentially what you want to do is you're kind of mixing along the bottom. I'll do this before I start incorporating any flour, but then you slowly want to pull in a little bit of flour from the side walls, and then you just give it a whisk with the fork. And my fork is I'll do it here. My fork is essentially resting on the bottom of my surface, and I'm just making a circular motion counterclockwise, however you whisk, counterclockwise, clockwise, it really doesn't matter, but you don't want to mix everything in together when you're doing the hand. So you just pull in a little bit, and then you mix it, and you pull in a little bit more. And as you get good at this, you can pull from the bottom, like as your fork, as you go around the walls, you'll start to pull in from the bottom of the walls a little bit more flour. If not, start to incorporate some of the wall. The only thing you want to try to avoid is by knocking the wall over too low, because then the water will spill out. It's not the worst thing in the world because it's all going to get incorporated anyway, but you want to mix it in slowly. So it should, at this point, it should start to maybe look like pancake batter. Everyone knows what that looks like. As you get more flour in there, it's going to get harder to work with the fork and you're incorporating. At some point, we are going to just collapse everything. Once it starts to not be runny, and if you took away all of the walls, it won't go anywhere. So you'll see, I'll just move one of the walls and the pasta's not going anywhere. So that means it's well incorporated enough to now just add all of your flour. And now you're just massaging this with the fork. At this point, you can start to use your hands. If you have a bench scraper, which is what I have, I recommend them for a lot of different uses. But these are great for pasta and for incorporating doughs like this. So I'm just gonna do this a couple times. You're really just folding it onto itself. So all we're doing now is just incorporating all the flour and the liquid. So you can see I'm just kind of like underneath it, folding it on. Very similar to like pie dough or biscuits. If you've ever worked with that, you can also just use your hands. They'll get a little sticky, that's okay. Cooking is about getting messy. And now you're just starting to knead it and work in all of this different flour. Julia, is anybody using the KitchenAid or machine? Has anybody gotten their dough ball?
Yeah, I'm taking a look. A few people are curious about the pine nuts. Do they need to take those out of the oven?
Great question. Mine still look okay. If again, you're not looking for too much color. If you can smell them, I would say that they're ready to be pulled. If you open the oven door and it smells like toasted pine nuts, I would go ahead and pull them out. I'm going to leave mine in a little bit longer.
Perfect.
And while we're going, we're getting into, hopefully you should have a dough ball that has some loose flour to it. You may be able to still feel some damp spots of water. That's great because as you can see, there's still a little flour on my board. You may have some wet spots on your hands, so you just wipe them off into the dough. This is great. I love seeing the view of everyone working their dough.
Yeah. All right. We have a bunch of you up on screen. So Dory, Tracy, Heidi and family, Carolyn, Pete and Jen, Alice, David and crew. So if any of you want to show us how it's going or unmute or bring your dough closer to the camera, please feel free to. Chris, can you remind me, what is that cool, it's like a knife. What's that called?
This is a bench scraper.
Bench scraper. Oh, Heidi. Oh, Heidi and the girls have done a cool job. The dough balls look great. If you can see those, Chris. That's awesome.
One thing I want to say about the dough is as you're working on your surface, as you start to get to this point where the dough ball starts to get formed, I typically either like to push the rest of the flour off to the side and just work with the dough ball. And then if I need to incorporate that, but you shouldn't worry about, there may be like little flakes of stuff that fall off. You don't have to worry about making sure that gets incorporated. It's okay that that'll go. It's kind of like natural with dough. And as you continue to knead, some more stuff will fall off. And again, you can just brush that off to the side. And then for kneading, in case anyone has any instructions, something I typically do for pasta dough, it really is a pretty good workout. What you want to do is with the bottom of the palm of your hand, starting from kind of the middle of the dough, you push away from you to 12 o'clock. And then what I typically do is then roll it back onto itself like that. So you're pushing and kind of creating a pocket, and then now you're pulling back with the same end of your palm, rolling it onto yourself. And then if you quarter turn it to 12 again, and just repeat. So you push away, and then pull and roll it onto itself. Quarter turn, push away, pull it onto itself, quarter turn. That's one method that I typically use to really well incorporate the flour and the liquid. But everyone has their own kneading method. There really isn't a right way. You can also just kind of knead it around. As long as you do kind of use a little bit of force as you're pushing away from it, as long as you're pushing, folding it onto itself and turning it just so it really gets incorporated all over. Now at this point, my dough is still a little bit damp. So I'm just going to pull over some of that excess flour that I pushed over to incorporate that in there. And this is partially why I left out the full 175 grams of water. I think it really does depend on the humidity, where you are, the weather, what your kitchen is like, how dry it is. That really does affect how your pasta doughs turn out. So we're just going to continue to knead this. For those cooking along, as you can see, I'm going to hold it up to the camera here. You can see these little dimples here. Maybe these, some people might call them imperfections. I don't know. They're not that bad. But that still means there's probably maybe like a minute, 2 more minutes of kneading that would need to happen. You're really looking for something that's very smooth. As you run your hand around it or your fingers, there shouldn't be any of those specks or flecks of flour that pop off. It should be completely smooth. That's how you know you're done. You don't need a lot of recipes online, and a lot of videos will talk about how you need to roll pasta dough for 15 or 20 minutes. I don't find that necessary. The resting period that we're going to do after we get the dough form is really going to hydrate the dough and incorporate that. The dough is going to relax, the gluten strands are going to form, and it's going to become really workable as we're making the shapes a little bit later.
So Chris, let's say your dough feels a little dry.
Mm-hmm.
Can you add a little bit more water? What do you recommend?
Yes, if the dough is a little bit dry and is still crumbly and falling apart and you kind of too much is falling out, you add a little bit of water at a time. I would say no more than a teaspoon. In reality, what I like to do is essentially just wet my hands and then start rolling again, and then wet my hands again and then start rolling, because you want to avoid going back and forth, putting too much water in, and then you got to add a little bit more flour, and then if you go too much on that, then you got to add water again. So it's a little bit of a delicate balance, but I think wetting the hands, if you want to add a spoonful, no more than a teaspoon, I think. It's one of the things when I thought about making a pasta class, of how some of this stuff is so much by feel. And instead, outside of the beginning measurements, then it's really about cooking, not just pasta, but cooking is about altering on the fly. If something doesn't feel right, if something doesn't smell right, if something doesn't taste right, what can you do to remedy that to get a good product?
Unfortunately, we don't have that video technology yet, but maybe in a few months, we'll get the scratch and sniff. We can feel like we're in the room with you.
How's everyone's dough working? Anybody have a finished smooth dough ball?
I'm taking a look. If you want to show off your dough, Carolyn, looking really good. I'm going to add you to the spotlight. I'm impressed.
Oh yeah, that looks good.
Let's see. Will, are you cooking along with us today? I think you might be. How's it going? Yeah? You look a little sad, but that looks like a great dough ball to me.
Okay, this is I'm gonna pull out my pine nuts. I can start smelling them. So just for everyone to see. Not much color on these, but they smell really good. one of the things I took away from culinary school is taste everything as you go to make sure you're on the right track. So I just tasted mine. Very good. My dough ball is just about there. Turn off the oven. And you can just set those pine nuts aside. We'll use them shortly, let them cool. They can cool in the pan, or if you want to put them in a bowl, we'll use them for the pesto. Okay. So my dough ball is about finished. So again, it's hard to, that's what I'm looking at. So another good test to see if your dough is really good is it should spring back if you want to push in a dimple. And if it springs back, that's a really good sign that you're in good shape with your pasta dough. One of the things I will say too, I know there's some people always ask, oh, like the bottom looks so ugly and there's like this, I don't know. Don't worry about it. It doesn't have to be smooth all around. The way that you're kneading it, you know, you're pushing really on one side and folding it over, and there's always going to be this ugliness that's on the bottom. That's okay. If you just tuck it into itself and you're really just kind of shaping it into a ball, you can round it, you can push it down into a disc. Honestly, it really doesn't matter because it'll hydrate as it's resting now, and this will go away, and we're going to be making shapes with it anyway, so it really doesn't matter what the bottom looks like. But I've had some people comment on ugly pasta bottoms. I'm a fan of that. I think there's a hashtag out there. Okay, Julie, you think we're good to let this dough rest? We good sense?
I think so. I'm taking a peek at people. You look like you're ready to move forward. So yeah, let's keep going.
Okay, so once you have your pasta dough, you just want to let it rest and you want to cover it. I suggest just wrapping it in some saran wrap or cling wrap. You can also put it in a Ziploc bag that's big enough for it. You could also cover it with a kitchen towel. Whatever you have, you just don't want to leave it exposed to the air to dry out. I think saran wrap is best, but we're just gonna fold this up and let it rest. Take like a 15-20 minute nap and let us do its thing. This is really important for pasta dough. You want to let it rest at room temperature because, like I said, that's really where the hydration comes in with the dough. And that's how the gluten strands are formed. And this will now become very workable for us as we go to make our shapes later. So,
Can you ever take this dough and freeze it and then come back to it, or put it in the fridge?
a great question. I put it in the fridge. If you know, if you're cooking immediately or within a couple hours, I keep it out at room temperature if I'm going to be using it. If you're going to, if you make dough in the morning and you're not going to be getting to it, to shaping it until, I'd say like 3 or more hours later, you can absolutely put it in the fridge. What I would say is let it rest at room temperature if you can for 20 minutes, and then throw it in the fridge, and that'll just keep it warm. And what I would say is when you're ready to shape it, take it out maybe 30 minutes before, again, let it come up to room temperature, so it's best to work with in that form. I have experimented with freezing dough. It worked to a varying degree. That dough that I froze I actually made a lot of different varieties of egg dough and a lot of different flavorings with some truffle and some herbs and spices. And I blended carrots and I did a parsley dough. And I just wanted to experiment. They still oxidized a little bit in the freezer. If I had my vacuum sealer, which I now have, which is great, I think that would work a little bit better to remove all the air. And the pasta turned out pretty well. I noticed a difference in the freshness and maybe in the chewiness of it when I made the frozen dough. But you can certainly try it. It actually works best, I think, if you can freeze, which I'll talk about later, freezing the pasta shapes. So if you can make the dough, if you have 40 minutes to make the dough, let it rest, and then shape it, that would be really good. And then you can freeze, which we'll talk about later, freezing the dough.
Cool. Is there a maximum time that you need to let it rest for?
Not a maximum. I think a minimum of 15 minutes would be good. And we'll when we get back to it later, you'll see how much it's relaxed, and you'll be able to feel a difference, hopefully. But yeah, 15-20 minutes, I would say, is the minimum that you want to let it rest. Ready to move on to the marinara?
Yeah.
All right. So first things first, we will get a pot on the stove, and we're going to add in the 1/4 cup of olive oil. If you don't have olive oil, any neutral oil will work fine. But a 1/4 cup into a pot over, I would say, medium-low heat. You don't want it too hot. But what we're going to do with this oil is just flavor it with the herbs. So we don't want to fry them. We don't want them to go too hard. And we're actually going to be discarding all of the herbs just to make a flavored oil with that. So if you want to get the oil on medium-low heat, and while that is coming up to temperature, if you want to start chopping the 1/4 onion, it's just a yellow onion. Any white onion, I think, is fine for this recipe. I will say some people, I don't know if it's like a highly debated topic, but some people don't like onions in their tomato sauce, in their marinara, which is perfectly fine. I don't feel either way. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I love the flavor of onion in it. Some people don't like the chunkiness of it. Some people don't want bits. I don't know. Some people from Italy may say that no pasta sauce or no marinara should ever have onions. I don't know where everybody falls, but I like onion in mine. Feel free to omit this if you don't like onion in yours. And then we're just going to take a 1/4 of an onion, or if you want less, if you want more, feel free to adjust based off of your preferences. But we're just going to give this a dice. And again, based on your preferences, if you want to leave bigger chunks and you like big pieces of onion in your sauce, keep the chunks bigger. If you don't, if you want to make them a little bit finer, go with a smaller dice. I personally I like to blend my onions up. I have one of those immersion blenders. You can also use a blender or a food processor, but typically I will pulse all of these onions. So they're all going to get ground up pretty fine for me into the tomatoes. So I'm not going to worry too much about the size of my onions. I also am not one of those expert knife people that can talk and dice at the same time. But I will give you a tip. This is here so people can see. Oh, actually, I forgot about this camera. A trick for dicing onions, if you don't know, is they have a pretty big size. So what you want to do is hold the onion down, and you kind of want to slice towards the root end, but not all the way through. And you want to do this about 1/3 of the way up on the bottom, and then another 1/3 of the way up. And you're really just creating a layer. And again, not all the way through. So you don't want to cut through. And then what you do is you turn the onion and you cut strips down here. And this really helps with dicing. So this will keep the onion intact and whole. Since you didn't go all the way through the root, the onion is still there, but you've created these strips and layers to now dice it. So my onion was pretty big, so I'm not going to use the full onion, but if you can see, this is probably palm full, maybe about 1/4 to 1/3 of the cup. And that's the onion that we're going to be working with. Sorry, it's a very strong onion. We don't want to add this yet. We want to flavor the oil. So for those following along, what you want to do is grab 3 or 4 garlic cloves. We're going to flavor it. I think I listed on the ingredients some some basil, needed that for the pesto, but if you have extra basil, rosemary, thyme, you can also add parsley in there, oregano, pretty much whatever flavor combination you would love or would like to flavor the oil. I think that would be good. I took some parsley from the plate that I got. I have some thyme and oregano. Again, we're doing nothing but flavoring the oil with these herbs. So it's really whatever you like. If you don't like rosemary, if you don't like thyme, if you don't like anything there, just don't use that, or use whatever combination of herbs that you have. But just anything that would really go that you think with a tomato sauce. So any of those ones that I listed, again, basil, thyme, oregano, parsley, rosemary. If you're using rosemary, I wouldn't use too much of it. That's a pretty strong flavor. But once your oil is getting up to temp, you can just throw in the herbs. And add a little bit more oil to mine. There's just a little bit thin. You want to add a little bit of oil. Maybe just another teaspoon or two would be good. You shouldn't hear too much of a sizzle. You wanna get them cooking, but like I said, we're not frying these herbs. And with the garlic, we're just gonna throw them in whole. You don't need to cut them. If you want to, you can take the skins off. Because we're discarding them, you don't have to. I like to, just because then you don't have to fish out the skins. A really easy way to get the skins off, especially when you're not chopping or you don't need a full clove and not doing anything, if you just put it under the center of your knife and either slap down or push down and kind of break it, then the skin comes off really easily. It can be discarded. So I hear my herbs now sizzling a little bit in the pan. Hopefully you all do too. Any questions, Julia?
Yes, I've been doing my best to answer them, so you'll correct me in real time if I was wrong.
Sure.
Someone wants to use avocado oil instead of olive oil.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. And for dried herbs instead of fresh, any recommendations on how much? I said start with a teaspoon and then taste to flavor, but what does the expert say?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have pointed that out. If you're using dry herbs, I wouldn't add them at this point. It's okay if you did. I would just keep the temperature maybe down a little bit. One of the things that we're doing is we're just really pulling the flavor out of the fresh herbs in there now. So what I typically like to do, using dry herbs is perfectly acceptable, but I would add them in when we add the tomatoes a little bit later. If you've already done that, no worries. But yeah, I think, depending on which one you're using, I like to use a little bit more oregano. Thyme, again, is a really strong flavor like rosemary. So you want to maybe like a 1/4 teaspoon of those. Again, it really depends on your flavor profile and how big you like it. And just in between, if you've got your garlic, again, whole cloves, you can just toss them in there with the herbs. Just kind of give them a stir around. I don't know if you can you hear the sizzle, Julia?
I'm listening. Bring it closer.
Yeah. Right.
I cannot hear the sizzle.
Okay, that's okay.
I'm trying hard though.
Yeah, everyone knows what sizzle. So, okay, what we're going to do is, I'm sorry. Were there any other questions I can answer before we move on?
I think we are good. I just popped the ingredients and the amounts in once again for everyone to see.
So it was a quarter cup of oil. I needed to add a little bit more. I needed to add about 2 tablespoons more. So anywhere from a 1/4 to a 1/3 a cup of oil is good. Any neutral oil that's not going to go crazy with a flavor. And then I added basil, oregano, thyme, and that's it for me. You can add rosemary, you can add parsley. Again, you don't have to cut them. You can throw in, you don't have to pick them. Everything just goes in the pot. So those herbs with 3 to 4 garlic cloves that are whole, with the skin on or not, it doesn't matter. Again, we're going to be discarding all of that. So just get that into a pot with the oil, medium-low heat. They should be sizzling Not crazy frying, not too high. We're just seasoning the oil. And so while we're doing this, just keep an eye, just as a reminder to keep an eye on the temperature to make sure it doesn't go too hard. While we're doing this is going, we can start on the pesto. That works. So I'm going to switch cameras, or Julia might switch cameras.
Yep.
Okay, so the pesto is mostly basil, has a little bit of spinach. You can use a mortar and pestle. Way more time consuming, produces a thicker, chunkier version of pesto. Some people would call that the pure way to make pesto, but again, time and ease is really good with a food processor. If you have a blender or a Vitamix, that can work as well. It's a little bit better with a food processor because we're going to add the oil and we're going to drizzle it in with the processor running a little bit at a time, versus with a blender, not necessarily that you can add the oil while it's running, or if you have one of those magic bullets or something that you turn over and lock it in. It's best with a food processor. So the first step is pretty easy. You're really just blending all of the ingredients together, and then you drizzle in the olive oil at the end until it gets to the viscosity that you want, to the thickness of the sauce. So I probably have about 2 cups of loose basil. I know in the ingredients it said just a bunch of basil. It's like, I don't know if you have these delis, these little old soup containers, but it's one of those. I don't pack it really tight. It's really just about 2 loose cups of basil. Again, like not picked, doesn't have to be finely. You can keep some of the stems on them. You don't want big chunks of stems. But starting with the greens, adding the basil. This one has spinach in it. Again, the ratio, you can see a lot more basil. Pesto should really be basil forward, in my opinion. So this was a 1/4 cup-ish of spinach. It's just going to go into the food processor. You can really use any type of greens here as well. You can use, I shouldn't say any, you can use parsley. I've added parsley. I actually have some tops of carrots that I'm going to add to mine. I got some carrots at the farmer's market today, and might as well add them. I've made carrot top pesto before. It's pretty good. But again, not too much because basil should really be the star. And what I like to do typical is give the herbs, give the basil, spinach, and anything else that you might want to add from an herb standpoint, from a green. Give that a couple quick pulses just to chop that up first. So we'll do that. You don't want to go too crazy, just a couple pulses to kind of incorporate all those greens in together. And the next thing I like to add, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, quick question. What about frozen spinach or any frozen green veggies?
It's a great question. I've never used the frozen version. I think if it were thawed and if you could squeeze out as much of the liquid as possible, I don't see why that wouldn't work. But I've never made that. But if somebody's using frozen spinach, I would love for you to give it a try, and you can be the test. And
Yeah.
let us know how it goes.
Keep us posted, Margaret, if you do use it.
So just a reminder to check on the herbs and the oil to make sure that nothing is too brown, nothing's too burned. Not looking for a ton of color. Some of the garlic might be getting brown, that's okay, but you just don't want any black or burned herbs. They're getting a little bit toasty. You can just turn down the oil. You can just keep letting that go. Okay, next for the pesto, I like to add, I'm a big garlic fan. I know some people don't like it. You can omit that from this. Some people only like a little bit. I'm a big one. I'm going to use 3 cloves. So I did take the skins off of these using the same method, but I just used my hand. I just smashed it down and then removed the skins. And I'm just going to add them to the food processor. The reason that I'm adding them separate is I want the food processor to chop them up. I don't like huge chunks of garlic in my pesto. So again, similar to what we did with the herbs, now that the herbs are in there, just give this a couple quick pulses or turn it on for a little bit to chop that garlic and work that in to the greens. Also, one advantage, I call it an advantage, to using your hand to smash garlic is the smell of garlic stays on your hands for quite some time. And I love that. I don't know why people don't like it. I guess I can see, but okay. So once you have the herbs and the garlic chopped up, pulsed in, now we can add everything else except the oil. So we would go with a 1/4 cup-ish of the nuts that you've toasted. Also, I guess now we don't have to toast the nuts. If you didn't toast the nuts, that's perfectly fine. Toasting them just really kind of brings out some of their oils and some of their flavor a little bit more. But using raw nuts is absolutely fine. You want to use about a 1/4 cup of the nuts if you have them toasted. I'm really bad at measuring, and I'm sorry, I should be doing this better, but I toasted a lot more pine nuts than I needed, and I just eyeballed it. But I think that is part of the fun with cooking. As I mentioned before, we're going to adjust and season and taste as we go along. So that was a 1/4 cup of pine nuts, a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. See, it's similar. I'm just going to eyeball it. There's nothing wrong with adding more cheese, in my opinion, unless you're lactose intolerant. And I apologize if you are. We will then add the zest of one lemon. Some people, I've had a few comments, even in culinary school, my chef, when I made pesto, when I was adding a lemon to it, he said that he was like flabbergasted and was like, no, that's not going to turn out well. And the acid from the lemon is going to, interact or react with something in the pesto and not make it good. It never does. I love the brightness and the freshness that it does. This is optional if you want to add a lemon. You don't need to. If you want to add half of the zest, if you want to add more, that's great. And then the juice of one lemon. We'll just use the lemon that we just took the zest off of.
As you do that, Christine, do you want to unmute and ask your question? See, your hand is up. Maybe it was a mistake. Okay, never mind then. How's everyone doing? I see a lot of people are doing the lemon part now. Okay, keep going, Chris. Sorry.
All right, great. So we've got the basil, spinach, and any other greens you might have added. We've got a 1/4 cup of pine nuts. We've got a 1/4 cup of grated Parmesan cheese, a couple garlic cloves in there, the zest and juice of a lemon. And so now we're actually at this point, can also hit it with some salt and pepper. I would say just a pinch of salt for right now, maybe like a 1/4 teaspoon, and maybe an 1/8 teaspoon of pepper. Again, we'll be seasoning it along the way, and we'll be tasting it to make sure that that's all incorporated. At this point, we're gonna start blending it up and adding the olive oil to it. So I like to scrape it down now ahead of time. We'll be stopping a few times to scrape down as well. But now you want to have, at this point, before you start blending it, you want to have your olive oil ready. And this was a 1/2 cup of olive oil. Similarly, you can use another type of oil if you want. Avocado certainly works. Vegetable oil does. Olive oil is mine of choice. And what we're going to be doing is I'm going to turn this on instead of pulsing it. I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to be slowly drizzling the olive oil in with the machine running. So it may get a little bit noisy, but you want to slowly incorporate the oil. So a slow, steady stream. You don't want to just dump it all in at once. And what really, before I do this, you're looking for a consistency that you like. Some people like really thick pesto. It depends on what you're going to be using it for. So if you like your pesto a little bit thicker, more like a mayonnaise that you can spread on sandwiches, and you don't want it too liquidy, you can stop if you get halfway through, or as you're looking at it. If you want to add all the oil and make it very thin, that's also great. That works well for pasta. Thick also works well for pasta too, because we're going to be combining it with pasta water. This is really up to you. It's similar. Half a cup of oil is just the guidepost. Plus or minus varying degrees of amounts. It's really up to you how thick you like your pesto. I'm going to turn this on, and we'll be slowly drizzling this in until I get to a consistency that I like. I'm going to stop I'm about halfway into my oil. And this is a good point to just scrape down the sides to make sure all the herbs and the cheese and the nuts are all well incorporated. I also think this would be a really good time to go back to our marinara and to pull out the herbs. So I think mine were just about done last time. So if everyone's at a good stopping point, if you stopped with the pesto, or if you want to finish with your pesto, that's fine as well. But I'm just going to get back to the marinara, and I will show you what we're doing over here. And all we're doing is fishing out these herbs and the garlic from the oil, and we're just discarding them. So I've just got a bowl here, let any of the oil drip, and just getting rid of all of the stems and the bigger leaves. If anything remains, if stuff fell off, and there's some, I'll show you this here. You can see in my oil, there's some oregano, there's a little bit of thyme. I'm okay with that. Again, we're flavoring the oil, so it's no big deal. That's, like I said, it's going to get blended, and also those herbs are delicious in sauce anyway. So you can certainly keep those ones in, but the big parts. So I pulled out all the big stems. We've got the garlic and any of the big leaves. We're just throwing them away, unfortunately, sadly. And at this point, now we want to sweat our onions. So once you pull out all of your herbs, you can go ahead and add in your onions to the pan. Again, shouldn't be too hot. You should obviously hear a sizzle when you're adding them in, because we're going to sweat them. If it's too hot, you want to turn it down a little bit. But you're not really looking for any color. Sweating onions is kind of at a lower heat, and they're pulling out the moisture and the flavor, and not giving them any color. So we are going to cook these for just a couple minutes. Let them go in the oil. You're looking for translucency, so you can kind of see through them a little bit more, just to cook them down. I'm going to turn mine down a little bit. And while they're cooking, I'm going to go back to the pesto and finish up that, because I still have half of my oil. So one of the biggest things that I learned in culinary school was to be efficient with your time. Everything is about efficiency in the kitchen and doing multiple things at once. So please stop me if I'm going too fast. Julia, you have done a good job of moderating me, but I know we're bouncing back and forth between the two things, but this is very efficient, as one thing is cooking on the stove and you can kind of step away from it a little bit. You can be making 2 sauces for your pasta instead of just one. So I'm back to the pesto. I've scraped everything down, and I'm just going to turn it on again and drizzle in the oil. right. We'll go show this to the camera here to show you what I ended up adding. The entire half. Yep.
I didn't know. There's 3 Chris cameras. So everyone bear with me. All right, I gotcha. Oh, that's so beautiful. So then I'm gonna just do, look at that. Wow.
And this was the full half cup of oil, and you can kind of see how
That's
it
beautiful.
falls off the spatula. Nice bright green color. You can see specks of it, which I like to see. This is a tasting point. Get a spoon. Also, just a reminder to keep an eye on your onions so they are not burning. Again, you're just looking for translucency. No color added to the onions. If you do add color, it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. They're still delicious. But give your pesto a taste. You're looking for essentially anything. The salt content, does it need a little bit more acid? Is it bitter? Mine is a little bit bitter from the carrot tops, but I like that. It has a little bit of a bite to it. I think that's also the bitterness from the garlic. I need a little bit more salt in mine, but this is for a consistency. You can see, I don't know if you can see, it's a little bit chunky from the cheese and from the nuts, but I love this. This is perfect for me. So I'm not going to add any more oil, but what I am going to add is a little bit more salt and a little bit more lemon juice.
Chris, do you have a favorite olive oil brand?
I do not. Actually, I would say it's not a brand, but when I visited, I have family in Italy. Oh yeah, I forgot. Part of my mom's side of the family lives in the Chieti region, which is about 3 hours east of Rome. I was able to visit them in 2018 or 2017. And so it's my grandfather's first cousin. He makes olive oil at his property and sent me back home with like 3 gigantic jugs. I felt like a boss checking in boxes of olive oil on my flight home to Italy. They all made it safe. That was the best olive oil I've had. It's not store-bought. And I ran out of it about a year ago and emailed them. It was during the pandemic when I ran out, so I couldn't just get some more, but I'm definitely planning a trip to get some. I typically, especially for pesto, just use whatever brand of olive oil, at my local grocery store. I just buy that brand. A lot of the expensive olive oils are more for like tasting and finishing olive oils. I wouldn't necessarily incorporate them into a sauce like pesto because there's so much other flavor going on between the cheese and the basil and the herbs that you've got in there. I know there's like olive oils that are like $40, $50 for like a small bottle, but I think any type of brand would do. Lemon juice, a little bit more salt. Okay, and then again, if you've adjusted seasoning, give it a taste. Make sure it's where you want it. Again, this is where you come in to your preferences and what you like, adding various ingredients to tweak based off of your salt, based off of your acid and your flavor profile that you love. But this is good for me. So I'm going to stop with the pesto. I'm set. Hopefully everyone else is. I don't know if Julie, if you want to check in on some pesto people.
Yes, I'm taking a look. I'm gonna pin a few people. Faith just messaged, feels like she can smell the pesto through the screen. It's so beautiful. Oh, Alice, this looks awesome. I'm adding you to the spotlight. Wow. Do you want to unmute and like tell us about how the flavor is?
Yeah, I think I added a tiny bit too much salt, but I like that for me. I don't know. I think it tastes really good. I'm pretty proud of myself.
Good.
That is impressive. I think we are all proud of you. Round of applause. Will, I've also got you up here on screen, and we're going to add Heidi and the girls in a moment. How's it going on your end, Will? Feel free to unmute on the bottom left. And
Good. I like it. It's very nice. Very tasty.
all right, and Heidi's gonna feed the Zoom screen for us. This is fun. How is it going on your end?
Good. We've got a nice green going just from basil. We didn't actually add any spinach because I didn't have any and I forgot to pick it up when I was getting our ingredients for the class, but it still came out nice and green and delicious.
Yes.
Very lemony, which I'm not used to, but the more I taste it, the more I'm into it. Oh yeah, my baby birdie's here. I'm loving it.
Amazing. Well done. This is great. Everyone's doing an awesome job. And if anyone else wants to say hello and let us know how it's going, feel free. Cool. All right, back to you, Chris.
All right. So now that the pesto is either done or about finished, that we can get back to the marinara, and then now we're going to start rolling soon too. So if you get back to the marinara with your onions, you've got the herby oil that we made. Onions should be sweated down by now. And all we want to add now is the 28-ounce can of the peeled tomatoes. I know we specified in the recipe, San Marzano, really good, better quality tomatoes. You can use any type of tomatoes, any canned tomatoes here that you would like. I find San Marzano to be the best. Fresh tomatoes also work. I just really like the amount of liquid that these shed off here, but there's also a lot of liquid from fresh tomatoes, depending on where you are. Tomato season, there's a lot of really good one. Early girl tomatoes work really well, but you can add them. If I probably should have specified, if you're going to use fresh tomatoes, you would want to peel them. That's a little bit more of a process. You would need to blanch them and then peel off the skin, and that's what you would be adding, because we don't want the skin in this sauce. So hopefully everyone has some canned tomatoes that they can just add. 28-ounce can. You don't need to mash them at this point, but once you get those added to the oil and to the onions, you can turn the heat back up a little bit, and you want to get that simmering while we're making the pasta sauce. I'm not going to blend and I'm not going to crush right now. I'm going to keep the tomatoes whole for a little bit while we're making some shapes, and let them kind of fall apart on their own before I go back and pulse it in there. Just so you can see what I see. And so there is some, you're adding the tomato to the oil. So don't be alarmed that there's this layer of oil on the top and some of the onions. That's absolutely normal. It's all going to get incorporated and all going to get emulsified as the sauce simmers and as it reduces, and then also as we mix it. But it's just something that you're going to want to stir every so often as we're making the pasta. So give it a stir, turn that up to low to medium-ish heat to get it simmering, and just keep an eye on it while we get back to pasta shapes.
Cool. And what about butter? Margaret wants to add butter for extra flavor to the sauce.
Absolutely. That butter is great, in my opinion, as a finisher. You can add it now if you'd like, but I think typically it would be best to let this simmer and let these flavors develop, and then adding butter at the end. It's also great to cook with, like right as you're dealing with the pasta, and adding another butter in finishing with the sauce right before you put it on the plate. But absolutely, I'm a big fan of butter. It's used all over the place in pasta.
Cool. All right, let's see how we make some shapes.
Ready for some shapes. All right, this is the fun part. So I think it's been about 30 minutes. It was about 4:40, 4:45, Pacific time, that we covered our dough. So this should be very well rested, very well hydrated. We can pull this out of the saran wrap or the bag or underneath the towel. One of the things about, before I say that, but now you can, I don't know if everyone can see, probably not as well. It is extremely smooth now, my dough. And on the bottom, some of those gaps filled in, so that ugliness isn't very ugly anymore, but it should be very smooth, shouldn't be sticky at all. There's nothing that comes out on my hands when you're working with this. And one of the important things about working with dough when you're shaping it is you only want to work with the amount that you're going to be rolling, and you want to cut some off and then rewrap it or recover it. So you don't want this to dry out. It will dry out relatively quickly. So whether it's with a knife or if you have a bench scraper, I would say we can just chop off maybe not a half. I would say a finger's width, maybe a thumb's width, a little bit bigger. A thumb's width wide of dough off of the end of one piece to start. And we will, rewrap that dough to keep that from drying out and just set it off to the side. We will start with the compunti first. So these were the pea pods that we used. These are from, where did I wrote it down? Sorry. Puglia, which is near the boot of Italy. So from southern Italy. Very easy shape to make. And they're pretty fun to make too. So what you want to do is with that dough that we rolled up, you want to get it into kind of a log, like a cigar shape. Most of the dough that we're going to be doing today is going to start in that shape. And we're going to want to roll this out into a thin log. So as you can see, it's just kind of stretching out. When you're rolling dough, you actually don't want it on a very smooth surface. And I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't put any flour down on my board because that prevents it from rolling. This board is actually really smooth because I always, when I clean it, it's almost like I've sanded it down with a bench scraper. So what I typically do is just like I have a little bit of a water bottle. I'll just very lightly spritz a little bit of water because you need a little bit of grip for the dough to roll properly. So when you roll, you want to start in the middle and not a ton of pressure, but you're starting in the middle and working your way out to the ends, going all the way to the end, applying even pressure. You don't want to be pushing too hard with one hand because you'll end up with a fatter dough on one side than you will the other. I don't know the measurement that we're looking for here. I will try and find a way to describe it. It's smaller than my pinky. It doesn't really do much good though, because you don't know how big my pinky is. Maybe about the size of a Crayola marker. That's a better descriptor.
Yeah, that's a great one.
For scale, here's my fork. But you can kind of see it's, honestly with these shapes, the size really doesn't matter. It's again, your preference of how thick you like pasta. If you have bigger pieces, that's fine. They're just going to be bigger pasta pieces and you may need less pasta on your plate. If you go smaller, that's also fine, and you may want more. So it's really up to you, but you want to get this long snake of pasta dough. You can kind of see my right side is a little bit thinner. So I'm just going to keep rolling the other side to try and make it as even as possible. And the reason that you want everything at the same size, the one thing I would say is if you go thick or you go thin, keep everything consistent because when you're cooking it, that's the cook time will vary. If you're going with thicker pieces, that might need to cook a little bit longer than if you do thin pieces. So if you have a pot that's full of half and half, half thick, half thin, then you may get some uneven cooking where one of the pieces may be done perfectly and the other one may be a little bit too firm, a little bit al dente. Okay, so for compunti, we want to cut this. Now that you've got your log, hopefully, or your snake, you want to cut this in about 1.5 to 2 inches. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be using our 3 middle fingers, our index, middle, and ring finger to form these. So a good test is about a little bit bigger than 3 finger lengths or 3 finger width wide. So I'm just going to go set my 3 fingers down and right up against, that's how big I'm cutting it. And I'm cutting it with my bench scraper. You can use a knife. You can use the back of a fork, whatever tool you want to use to cut these into, again, uniform pieces. Cut up your log. And so you should be left with now pieces that look like this when they're all cut. Great. Also, just a reminder, keep an eye on your sauce that needs a stir. Make sure it's not going too hard, not bubbling like crazy. This is a good time to check the firmness of the tomatoes. They should be starting to fall apart, starting to get softer. But again, we're just letting that go to develop the flavor. All right, Julia, how are we looking on this part? Ready to start shaping?
Yeah, I'm taking a look. Danielle saying that they're very Halloween-esque. They're like pasta, little pasta bones.
Yes.
I'm taking a look around. If anyone's ready to show off how it's going, let us know. But people look like they're making progress. So I think we're ready for the next shape.
All right, so to shape these, so this is actually just cutting them into the log. Now the shape, these are compunti. These are, we're going to be using 3 fingers to shape these into pea pods. So pretty easy. We're going to be pushing away from the dough and kind of like rocking it to make that what I would call a sauce pocket. But so taking your 3 fingers, you push away from you and you push down, and then now you pull it back and let it kind of like roll. And that is what you will get. So it's pretty smooth and circular on the back side where you pushed and rolled it. And then the inside should look like an empty pea pod. So that is 3 fingers, push away and down, and then pull back and let it roll onto your kind of the back of your fingers. Push away and pull back. You could also do this with 2 fingers if you like smaller pieces as well. You can also do it with 1, but it's going to be small. You can use whatever 2 fingers you want. And again, push away, pull back. And there's a pea pod. I like these a little bit bigger. So I use 3 fingers, but again, it's up to you on what you want your pasta shape to look like. Back. Anyone has a maid and wants to show, this would be great.
Yeah, I'm taking a look. Chris, what is the area of Italy that this shape is from, and remind us of the name?
Yeah, it's Puglia, which Puglia? I'm sorry, I'm Italian, but I don't speak Italian. I'm sure I'm butchering it.
We won't.
But it is in, I believe, the boot of Italy, portion of that. So.
Cool. I've just added a few folks. Alice, we're gonna check in with you too. Heidi and the girls, Pete and Jen, Carolyn, if you all wanna let us know how it is going or wanna show off, or Dory, I'll add you too. Let's see, anyone ready to share a shape? Oh, wow, Heidi and Ayala and Daphna looks amazing. Pete and Jen looking great. If I'm saying that right. Oh, and Carolyn, this is cool. Alice, did you want to show us? I might have missed. Wow, nice. And Dory, if you have anything you want to share, not sure how it's going, but okay, cool. Oh my gosh, Pete and Jen have a jar of pesto sauce that looks,
Nice.
Wow, awesome.
Great.
Very good.
One thing I would say at this point, if you want to push these off to the side, whenever you're working with pasta, after you get through the log, I just like to cover them in flour. I like semolina flour to cover them the best, just because it works really well, so they don't stick or anything like that. If you have a towel, this is good to want to just pop over it to cover them up. Because we'll be cooking with these, if we are going to be cooking with these, anyone cooking tonight, we'll be cooking with them so soon that you don't have to cover them up. They won't dry out that quickly. We'll get them in the water shortly. But if you have a towel handy, maybe dust them with a little bit of semolina and cover them with the kitchen towel. I also think this is a good point. If anyone is going to be cooking the pasta tonight and eating, maybe grab a pot of water and get it on the stove and turn that up to, bring that up to a boil. So that way we can time this all. We don't have to wait for the water to boiling. We can be efficient. So I'm going to have a pot of water and turn it on high while we're making the other couple shapes. So that's compunti, very easy. If you remember pea pods, you roll it out to a snake and then 2 or 3 fingers, you just roll away and pull back, and delicious. This works with, in my opinion, a really sauce like pesto is great for this, because really any type of sauce, but any thicker ones, anyone that really coats pasta very well, you're creating those pockets by putting those indents into it. So it really like soaks up all of the sauce. If you have like a meat sauce or anything that has veggies or little bits of anything, they get stuck in there. So then when you're eating the pasta, you get delicious bites. Okay. So, Julie, I think we're ready to go to the next shape.
We are ready.
All right.
How do you, oh, I lied. Quick question. What if we are not cooking tonight? How do we store uncooked pasta?
Great question. You can do it a couple ways. As I mentioned, these, because it's just flour and water, you can store these in an airtight container or a baggie in the pantry. I would keep them out of the direct sunlight or anything like that. But I would, if you're going to be storing them in dry, you really want to use a decent amount of flour and coat them very well in the container so they don't stick together. The semolina works great, again, because it's a little coarser. You can certainly use all-purpose, but I would recommend semolina. Similarly, if you want to, you can keep them in the fridge, same thing, dust them and pop them in a Tupperware container and then store them in the fridge. And you can also freeze these as well, same process. Obviously for freezer space, a baggie might work better, but again, give them a dust of flour, semolina preferable, and then just pop them in the freezer. And they would work like any other pasta. Depending on when you cook them, especially in the freezer, they might take a few extra minutes just because they're coming out frozen. And also if you store them in the pantry and then you get to them a week later or a couple days, it may just take a few extra minutes. If we're cooking them now, they will cook very quickly in a matter of minutes, like 2 or 3 minutes. They should start floating and then they'll be good to go.
Cool, thank you.
Sure.
That's shape number 2.
Yes, just another quick reminder to check on the sauce, make sure that's going well and not going too hard. Tomatoes, my tomatoes are really falling apart now with just a rubber spatula, so it's getting pretty good. I'm gonna blitz that next time I get to it, but just a low simmer. Again, I'm just letting flavors develop. Okay, the next shape that we're gonna do is cavatelli. Sorry, I need to look at my notes. This is also from Southern Italy, and these are kind of like little hot dog buns. What I like about these is putting some textures. I would say grab another similar sized piece of dough from your ball. If you want to go a little bit bigger because you're working into the middle of it, you're not on the ends. Don't forget to rewrap whatever dough you're not using so that doesn't dry out. And same process for cavatelli. We are just going to roll it out into a thin snake. So while we're rolling this, I know Julia mentioned it, it was in my bio, but I started a pasta club a couple of years ago, just to get better at pasta. A friend of mine at work gave me a book. It's called Sauces and Shapes, and it was written, I think, by an Italian grandmother and her daughter from Italy. And it was one of the first cookbooks that I read, like all of the pages. And I got really inspired learning about where these shapes come from, the history of them, the sauces that are paired with them, and then all of the recipes. And I just wanted to start cooking my way through the cookbook. And making pasta for one is, I don't need to eat that much pasta. And it's really hard to make one portion of pasta. As you can see, one dough ball, this is probably about a pound of pasta. Should feed about 4 if you work your way through this dough. I also love hosting dinner parties. So I figured I would make pasta, work my way through these recipes, and feed all of my friends. So that was in late 2019. I got through a couple pasta clubs in person, and then as we all know what happened last year at the start of 2020, the pandemic hit. But I actually used that opportunity to cook pasta even more. And I turned it into a virtual club to where I got to-go containers and continued to make pasta, and actually was doing it where I was previously doing it once a month live at my house. I started doing it once a week. It's a great, very time consuming, depending on how involved the recipes were or how involved the pasta shapes were. And it continued to allow me to practice. But even better, it helped me stay connected with my friends in a time where we couldn't go anywhere, and state of the world was what it was. It was a great connection point. So I cooked pasta here by myself, and then I got to-go boxes. My friends came and picked it up at my front porch, kind of left it out there, as created a schedule for them to come pick it up. And then we all went home, hopped on the Zoom, and we all ate dinner together. Once a week, I had a ton of friends. The purpose of it was to combine friend groups. I have a couple different pockets of friends that I hang out with. And the purpose of, in my opinion, of food is bringing everybody together and all getting under the same roof, all getting at the same table or on the same Zoom like we're doing now. And it was just a great way to stay connected. And it really helped with what was going on last year. I also, deepened my knowledge for pasta and learned a lot of different shapes and different sauces and things that I liked, and really getting better at the classics, the cacio pepe, the carbonara, just Alfredo, although not like the Americanized Alfredo. It was great. And I still do that today. Now that things are getting somewhat back to normal, I've been able to have 2 very small pasta clubs at my house. But I'm still doing the virtual ones as well. And I'm excited to get back to hosting dinner parties and hosting people in person. So while hopefully everyone's got their next log rolled out, I don't know if you saw, it's about the same width. I just cut mine in half because it was a bigger piece of dough. So we got to this same point, same thickness. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna cut one of these the similar size, so about an inch, inch and a half, and I will cut another one smaller. Cavatelli are kind of similar to gnocchi. If anybody has made those, gnocchi are made with potato. This is obviously just flour and water, but we're gonna put some texture to these. And I'm gonna cut another one. These are about maybe an inch, a little bit smaller. And what you'll need for this, you can really use anything that has, water's boiling, turn that down. Anything that has any type of ridges or whatever. This is a gnocchi board. I didn't put this down. If anybody has one of these, this is really just a piece of wood that has really fine ridges. And essentially what it is to create that texture. I have a box grater here with various different size holes. I'll show you how to do it with that as well. And you can also just use a fork. The prongs of a fork will also work to give it texture. So I will start with the gnocchi board. If anybody has one of these are a great tool. You can find them on Amazon. Julie, I'm sorry, I probably should have said if anybody wanted to pick these up. They're pretty cheap, or any type of kitchen store. What I typically do is, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I put your cookbook in the link, in the chat if anyone wanted to check that out. So tell me the name of this board again.
Oh, this is just a gnocchi board.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll find it.
And what you do with these is with cavatelli, you're really, again, you're creating, I mentioned it looks like a hot dog bun because you're really just creating it, but you're creating it, that pocket with just one finger and typically your thumb. So essentially what you're doing is taking one of these pieces of pasta and you're going to roll it against whatever tool you have to work with. So in this case, it's the gnocchi board. You want to tilt it down a little bit. And again, you just lightly put your thumb on it and you want to roll it down the board and it'll roll. And now you're creating, now you've got these lines on it, kind of, and when you flip it on the other side, now you can see maybe why it looks like a hot dog bun. But now you've created some texture. Again, it's really all for the sauce to penetrate. So a couple more on the gnocchi board. You're really just, again, with the thumb, light pressure, just rolling it over and let it roll down. One more on the board. Everybody has that, but I'll switch to box grater now. Again, now there's preference. This one has small holes and then big holes. And this is the grater side. I'm not going to use that because it'll get too stuck there. But I will use the small holes. Same thing, just dust a little bit of flour on it so it won't stick too much. And again, you're just pressure, pushing it down. Now this one, you can see has the holes from the grater, and on the other side, you've created that bun. Sauce packet.
I love the shapes and the texture. It's so cool.
Yeah. Again, see that. You do it on the bigger side too if you want the bigger. I don't like the bigger ones as well. That kind of looks like, I don't know why this reminded me of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Looks like a turtle show. But I like the smaller ones a little bit better. And for those using a fork, it's again the same process. So you just want to angle the fork. Now that's why I cut these a little bit smaller, is because the width of the fork is smaller. But you can prop it up, and again, it's a little bit harder rolling it. It doesn't create as much of a bun, but it does create the hole, and it does create the ridges on the backside. Just rolling it down.
I had no idea the fork was such a versatile gadget.
Yeah, it's good for everything. Could probably also, if you want to do it flat, you could also do the same thing. Just don't use your thumb. I'll brush away some of this flour so it can roll. Again, if you want to use the same premise, but keep it flat, you don't have to create the ridges on the outside. Again, you would just kind of start at the back end, pressing down in the middle and just rolling it over. And now you created the little hot dog bun. My favorite is the gnocchi board. It's cheap. It makes it look really good, in my opinion. And it works really well to just kind of, you can see how much easier it is with the semolina and the way the board is constructed with the pasta, it just rolls right off and you can kind of crank through these.
So Chris, fast fact, how many of these how fast can you roll these?
Great question. I don't know. I've never timed myself for these. I have videos, but maybe we can look at this recording and just see how many I just did in that thing, and I can just do some quick math. So this is our batch of cavatelli. Yeah, so you got the different ridges, different shapes, but all not different shapes, same shape, but different textures, different looks, and yeah, similar to the capunti. It's got a sauce pocket in the middle. I would go ahead and throw it under that towel again. sprinkle the new pasta with a little bit of semolina and cover it. And then we'll get to Latkes. Now at this point, I think this is a good point to check on the sauce. So my sauce looks really good now. The oil is starting to incorporate. Oil is starting to incorporate. The tomatoes are really breaking down. For me, this is a good point that I'm going to now use the immersion blender and blend this up so it's a little bit smooth. You could certainly put this into a blender if you want and just pour it in and pulse it if you want. You could mash this. I would not suggest mashing it with your hands because obviously it's hot. But if you have a potato masher or a fork and you want to break up those tomatoes, that's really good. Kind of depends on how chunky you like your sauce. Some people like it really chunky. Some people want it as smooth as possible. I'm kind of somewhere in between. I want a little bit of chunkiness, but I don't want big, massive bits of tomato. So I'm going to run the immersion blender really quick. I will. An immersion blender, for those who don't know, is just one of these tools that you can just stick right in the pot. And then you want to splatter control here though. Make sure that it's all the way, your blender is all the way on the bottom of the pot. And this is also what I said, this is why I like, I don't mind the big chunks of onion because this is where it gets blitzed up. Any of this onion will now get pulverized and kind of incorporated fully into the sauce. Okay, that's all mine needs. I'll give it a shake this. This is also, the blending also really works to emulsify and to incorporate the oil into the sauce. You can still see a little bit, some of the oil. You're always going to have a little bit of a separation, but that's what the stirring does. If you don't want to blend it and you're just kind of mashing it, again, just stirring it, it'll all incorporate as it cooks down. But that's now what my sauce is looking like. And this had the flavored oil. This is also a good time to taste and add a little bit of salt and pepper. We haven't added salt to this point, so this is just the oil. Definitely needs salt. Pretty good amount. And now, when you get to this point, now we're just going to let this simmer. And this is now to the point where it'll be good, and it can be good to eat now once you get the seasoning adjusted. But the longer that you cook sauce, the more the flavor develops. You're going to reduce it, and it's going to get richer and taste better. So we can use this now when we eat, or if you want to let this go for a little bit and continue to reduce, that's also good. I usually like to let it simmer maybe about a half hour after this point, if I can, if we've got the time. But now we just want to let that go on low heat. I would also just, as a reminder, check on your water, because we're getting to the last shape. And then after this, we can toss them in the water. And for those of us eating along, following along, we can eat. Julia, any questions before we get to the next shape?
I think, yes, we are good. And everyone, we know we're a little bit over, sorry about that, but thanks for sticking with us, all 120 of you still here. We will send out a recording, but keep staying with us because we want to see how it turns out for you, but understand if you need to go, but we are good to keep going to shape number 3.
All right, I'll go try to be quicker with this one. So these are Latkes. These are my favorite shape. They are the most time consuming. They are a little bit tricky to get, but I thought it would be fun to kind of teach them. These are originally from Sardinia in Italy, and these are the wreaths that look like braids. So same process again, you're gonna cut out a chunk and we're gonna roll it out. Now you don't have to worry about it being so uniform on one end because we're only gonna work on one end of the dough. And we're gonna get this pretty thin. I would say 50% thinner, maybe even 75% thinner than what you were working with for the other two shapes, for the Capunti and the Cavatelli. We want this pretty thin because we're gonna wrap it around each other and it will puff up quite a bit while cooking. So as you can see, I'm leaving one end of the pasta untouched and I'm just rolling the one side of it to work with. And I'm kind of keeping my left hand in the same position and I'm really only moving right with my right hand to get that down. So hopefully you can see that. I'll put this alongside of it. Now you can see how much of a difference thickness that we're talking about. This is probably pretty good, even a little bit thinner. This is smaller than the size of a pencil. It is pretty thin and you'll see why. But essentially what you do is you really roll only the little bit that you're going to use, and I got a measurement here. This is probably about 7 inches, 7-8 inches of pasta. And for Lorgitas, it's typically, I use 3 fingers. You might be able to use 2 fingers, but essentially you wrap it around. I like to drape it over the first 2 fingers here, and you wrap it around, and then coming across, and you cross over at the top point here, and then bring it around again, and now meet this initial point right there, and pinch off the dough. So now we started right there. Wrap over the top 2 fingers, pull it around, cross it over on the top, and then bring it around to meet those points. And that's where you can just press and kind of roll. So it joins those 2 pieces of pasta. So now the pasta is crisscrossed. And now all you're doing is you're going to roll it on each other and kind of braid it. So you're just essentially twisting. And now you can see these twists that are coming. And you're making a braid. And then once you get it to however many twists and braids you want, then you stop and you can kind of stretch it out just a little bit, light pressure, because it will seize up a little bit. But that is a Lorgita. And now you have this oval shaped wreath. And then you can get back to your dough and you want to roll out the next piece. Similar, working one piece, but now you can kind of see why this is a little bit time consuming. There's no reason why you couldn't roll this entire thing out to the length that you want and to just kind of roll. I find that just as time consuming versus just going a little bit at a time. What you can do is you don't have to cut it off, but now you've got another strand again over your top 2 fingers. Wrap it around, crisscross it at the top, and now meet those 2 points and pinch it off. Whenever you're joining 2 points of pasta, it's called double thickness. So you want to squeeze that and you kind of want to pinch it and roll it in your hand so it somewhat matches the same thickness of the rest of the dough, because when you layer that on top, that will be a very tough bite if it's twice the size. So again, then you take it off and you just twist. You kind of like loop and bring those over. I don't really know the best way to describe it, but you're just kind of twisting and kind of rolling it on your finger to create this little twisting action. Yeah. Like that. How's everybody doing with this one, Julia? I know this is a little bit of a tougher one.
Yeah, I'm taking a look to see how our dream teams are doing. So Heidi and the girls, you're up. Dory, oh, I see some great people are having success. This reminds me of friendship bracelets a little bit.
Yes, that's a great analogy.
All right, Pete and Jen, Going well. It looks like Becky, I'm going to add you in.
Nice.
Feel free to show off. I'm looking for a few others. Let's see. We'll add you. But it looks like people are doing great. Carolyn, you're getting added to the spotlight. It's such a shame when we post the recordings, you can't see all the spotlights. So just sorry for people who are watching the recordings. Oh, Becky's like eating dinner already.
Nice. All right.
That's awesome. David and team, I know you all have a big crew, but if you want to come closer to the camera with a plate or show us how it's going, we'd love to see. Tracy, I'll add you into the spotlight. So, all right, I got as many as I could see, but anyone want to unmute and let us know how it's going?
We're lost.
No, we're not. I'm not lost. No.
All right, Chris, you want to do where do y'all might need some help? Chris could maybe repeat something.
Just the finger rolling.
Sure.
Thank you.
I noticed. It probably took me like 3 or 4 times making the shape to feel comfortable getting it. So I've got my index, middle, and ring finger here, and I'm going to drape pasta over the index and middle finger. And so now the pasta, the end piece is on the inside of my hand and the back is draped over the back of my 3 fingers. And now I'm going to wrap it around and kind of come back up to loop it over my index finger. And when I loop it over the top, I'm going to cross it over. So now there's a crisscross at the top. And then I'm going to drape it back down. And now I'm going to meet and pinch off the 2. So now I have a complete circle, I guess you would say, but now it's intertwined and now it's at the top here. So it's crossed over here. And then when I take it off, I guess the best way to describe it or show it here. So now I've got these 2 pieces that are crisscrossed over here. And when I take it off my finger to roll it, I take the back one and I twist it over the top and then tuck it under. And now essentially I'm just tucking each of them under it. And this creates the braid. So then you just kind of roll it in between your finger in the same manner. And you're really just entangling it up. And you can do the same thing at the bottom, or if you just keep doing it like this one, it starts to creep to the bottom. I struggled with describing this one because it's a pretty tricky shape to get. Does that help at all? Any other success?
I mean, you just have to kind of.
Yeah, no, this is great. I feel like that was an extra helpful explanation. Thank you.
Great.
And some people are getting ready. They're eager to cook the pasta.
Yes. Okay. So why don't we do that? So I've got the Lorigitas are tough. I can always come back to them, or we can practice later. I think that's the toughest shape to get. But hopefully we've got a decent amount of pasta from the other ones, the Compote and the Cavatelli. So I turned my water back up. Hopefully it's boiling for you. Make sure you salt pasta water pretty heavily. I think it's a lot more salt than people think. There's a terminology out there. It should taste as salty as seawater. I don't know if it needs to be that salty. You can oversalt your pasta water, in my opinion, but I don't have a measurement here. This is, if I can guess, I'll try and get a measurement. I'm adding a pretty good handful of salt here to the water, and probably 2 of those. It's probably close to a 1/4 cup of salt.
A 1/4 cup of salt.
Well, maybe not a 1/4 cup. Maybe I don't know, a little bit less. A lot of salt. It should be very salty. When you taste, if you taste the pasta water, it should taste salty. Also, at this point, with the sauce should be good now. Now it's just doing its thing. You can certainly add. This is a great spot to add any dried herbs that you want. I think the sauce is good now. It's pretty simple, but very straightforward, tomatoey flavor. Hopefully the herb oil comes through. I like to add parsley. I love the look that the speckled green gives into the sauce. So I've got some fresh parsley. I'll probably just add maybe like a tablespoon of that to mix in. Dried parsley. With the dried herbs, I typically like to go like a third to a quarter of the amount of fresh that I do for the fresh. So if I'm adding a tablespoon, maybe a quarter tablespoon, or half a teaspoon would be good. Just whatever you like. Oregano is really good here. Basil, fresh basil is great in this. I'm just adding parsley here. And again, don't forget to taste along the way to make sure that your salt and your seasoning is good. So I'm gonna put that on the back burner now. And my pasta water is boiling, so I'm gonna drop some pasta. One of the things that I would always suggest, I'm gonna throw in both my compunti and my cavatelli. They're about the same size. Fresh pasta, when you make fresh pasta, it really does not take long to cook. It really should be done in about 3 minutes at most, because it's very fresh. But when you add it into the pasta water, give it a stir so it doesn't stick to the bottom. Even though I'm recommending a certain amount of time, it really is about taste. Some people like their pasta a little bit firmer. Some people like it a little bit softer. You can only get that really by tasting it. So a good sign for me is when the pasta starts to float. You'll see it really starts to puff up with fresh pasta, and it really kind of gets a lot bigger. And that's when, for me, I start tasting it and to see where it's done. And another thing that I learned about pasta, how they do in restaurants, a lot of the pasta they get in restaurants, I've started doing it at home too, is finishing the pasta in a pan. So I just have a saute pan here. I put my saucepan off to the back burner to keep that simmering. But typically you would add a little bit of sauce to the pan, to your saute pan, a little bit of the pasta water. And this is, I know there was a question earlier about adding butter. This is also a great place to add butter for richness and for flavor. Great addition to that. But finish the sauce, a little bit of pasta water, maybe a little bit of butter if you prefer, and you just kind of let that emulsify and stir that around. And then when the pasta is ready, you would put the pasta directly from the water into the pan and kind of let it finish there. That really helps the pasta absorb the sauce and kind of suck all that goodness up. So I highly recommend it. Don't need to do that if you don't want to dirty another pan, or you don't have the space on your oven or stovetop. That's perfectly fine. You can drain the pasta and toss it with the sauce. The one thing I would say is to always reserve a quarter to a half a cup of pasta water. Pasta water is referred to as liquid gold. It is, not only does it add flavor, but it also really tightens up sauces and does wonders for pasta dishes. So my pasta is actually starting to float already. Don't think it's done, but I'm now going to put a little of the marinara sauce. I'm going to do maybe like,
Chris, what if someone wants to cook it in one of the sauces? Is that recommended?
not fully. So you mean, is the question like to cook the pasta, not use the water, but just throw it into the marinara to let it cook?
Yes, that is the question.
I would not do that. I've never tried that. But I would suspect that the pasta sauce is too thick to cook the pasta, especially in a short amount of time. That may happen. It may cook given the right amount of time. But I would suggest cooking it in water first. So as my pasta is starting to float, I'm going to give it a little taste. Mine is not done yet, maybe like another minute. Another good thing about the pan with the sauce is, sorry, I'm just gonna get a measuring cup to save some of this pasta water.
Chris, is it possible for you to tilt your iPad or computer a little bit so people can see your pan as it's, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, this pan?
Perfect.
Yeah, so this is the saute pan. I've got a little bit of the marinara sauce. I'm gonna add a splash of the pasta water here and just kind of stir this up. It really helps. Yeah, I can't tell you. When I tried the pasta, one thing to note is it was well salted. So that's what I mean by you should be able to taste the saltiness of the water, and that's because I tried it directly out of the pasta. So now this kind of, you can see it just thinned it out a little bit, and you get it back on. I can go back to here. Well, actually, my phone is going to die, so that overhead camera might disappear soon. But you're really just kind of working the sauce around, and I think my pasta is about done. So what I'll do, also this is a great tool if people don't have this. This is called a spider. This is great. It's kind of like a strainer. It's perfect. You can let some of that water drip off, but this is a great way to get the pasta directly from the water, and you don't need to worry about draining it. A lot of people just immediately dump the pasta water into a colander, and you lose all that goodness. You want to save some of it, but also this is a great way to get some of that pasta water right into the pan. So now we're just pulling this pasta. Oh, actually, I'm going to save some. I forgot about pesto. I'm going to save some of this. Turn off the water. Just keep it in the water. And so now you just finish. This is technically called finishing the pasta and finishing the dish. And now we're just using our spoon to kind of go back and forth, coating the pasta. This is also a great place to add some cheese, which I will do. I've got some grated parm from earlier from the pesto. Just get some cheese in there. This is also, you can add some butter. I think people would be shocked to know how much butter is in pasta. And when people are finishing pasta dishes, I won't burst that bubble and tell you how much, but butter is your friend here. It's only going to bring out the flavors. But now, so now you're just working around the sauce. Some of the cheese is melting. That pasta water is helping it stick, helping the sauce stick to it. And now, plate. Put it in there, spoon it in, however you want. Make sure all that sauce gets on there. This is a great place to, if you want to add additional sauce in the marinara, you can top it off there. Another sprinkle of cheese. For me, like I said earlier, cheese is never a bad thing. And then I will also finish it with just some fresh parsley on top. So there is the
Wow, the camera's totally steaming. It's having a.
how about over here on this one?
Hold on, I gotta find you one sec. Let me unpin the other. Wow, I feel like I'm at a restaurant right now.
Yeah, my chef would yell at me. That's dirty. I would have to clean that plate, but you get the idea. Home cooks don't need to be worrying about that too much.
Looks amazing. I want to do a quick spotlight and add some of our friends who've been cooking along to see how they're doing. If you want to show us your plates, how it's coming, we would love to see. Tracy coming back at you, Dory, Heidi, Alice. Alice, you're a very independent chef. Do you have a sous chef with you? I hope.
No, I don't. I mean, I do have guardians watching
Okay.
in case anything happens, but yeah, I'm cooking by myself right now.
Wow, very impressive. That is awesome. he will be teaching us in no time. Tracy, how did it turn out? Okay?
Yes, it turned out good. My husband did a good job on the last one, but we were too, I don't know if you can see. We've already put in the pesto.
Nice. Yeah. Are they the lower details to do with the pesto?
Yeah, we just stuck it all in together.
Nice.
I didn't do a good job on the pesto, so I'll have to work on that.
I was just gonna add, if you wanna, Julia, I was just gonna add, I cleaned out my pan just to show the pesto. I reserved some of the pasta, some of the cavatelli that was still in there. So I will add similarly there's not that much pasta in there, but same process. I'm gonna add some pesto to the pan. Adding some pesto to the pan, to the hot pan, and then adding a little bit of pasta water to thin that out. This is also a great place to add some cream. If you have any heavy cream, that makes a really good pesto cream sauce. It's a little bit richer, obviously, but the flavor of that is delicious. But you can see how adding that adding the pasta water really thins it out, and that'll help it stick with the pasta. And now I can just add that directly from the pasta water into the pesto, and just get that back on the stove. I don't think I talked about temperature, but I've got this on like medium heat on the stove. You want it sizzling, and you want it like moving, and you want to hear it. And this is also a place to finish it. So I know there was a question earlier about completely cooking your pasta in the sauce. I've never done that, like I said, but this is a great place to finish it. So what I typically do is I will pull my pasta a little bit early, and so it's still got a little bit of a bite, because adding the pasta water and the sauce here, I'll let it cook for another minute or two to finish the cooking process in the sauce, so it really absorbs it when it cooks it. That flavor just gets into all the little hot dog bun and pea pod. But yeah, we'll let this go a little bit. Okay.
Awesome.
Any questions at this point? We're kind of getting to the end now. Sorry this was a little bit long.
No, this was great. You gave us like a complete walkthrough. It's amazing. Any questions? We'll also, in a few minutes, wrap up and turn off the recording. So if anyone has questions you want to ask when we're not recording, you can save that for that time. And just as a reminder, if you do have to drop off, we will be sending out the recipe and the video recording in the next 24 hours. We are a volunteer-led community, so as soon as I get some time to upload it to YouTube and put it on our cooking library, it will be there for all of you. Any questions? Do you ever rinse the pasta before you put it in the sauce?
I do not. You mean from the pasta water?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I do not, because I really like the saltiness. Let's put this back up so I feel weird talking to nobody. I really like the saltiness that comes from the water. And also that's just the extra way to transfer the pasta water into the sauce. If you are not finishing it in a pan like this, which I think most people don't, and you absolutely do not need to, I don't rinse it either. I would just drain it in a colander and then take it from there and toss it into your bowl and sauce it there. I want that, like the pasta water really just is almost like an absorbent, and it's like stickiness that takes the sauce and keeps it stuck to it. So I want that. The only time I would make an exception to that, I would say, is if, let's say you make your pasta ahead of time and you don't, you've got 15 minutes and you don't want to sauce it, or 20 minutes, you could put some olive oil on it just to help the pasta not stick together before tossing it in the sauce. That's the only time I would, but that's not really rinsing it. That's, again, more coating it. But I would not wash off the pasta water from the pasta.
Embrace all that salt. And I'm going to bundle a few questions together. Do you have any favorite salts that you would recommend? And then how do you store the pasta after you've made it?
Sure. I don't have a favorite salt for salting water. I just use regular sea salt, regular table salt works fine. I personally wouldn't use a nicer or a higher end or a flavored salt in pasta water because of the dilution and because of what we're doing. I'm a big fan of Malden salt, which is the flaky sea salt. That's a great finishing salt. So if you wanted to, if you tasted it and you know, after you sauce it and it needs a little bit something, a little sprinkle of flaky salt is great, not only for the seasoning that it provides, but also they stay a little bit crunchy, so provide some texture to anybody. And then, do you mean storing the pasta once it's cooked?
Yeah, you want to have leftovers or maybe the next day.
Sometimes leftover pasta, depending on the sauce and the preparation, I think leftover pasta can be better than fresh pasta sometimes. But no, I typically just keep it in any type of Tupperware. I think if you're using a red sauce, it's, in my opinion, best to use glass Tupperware just so it doesn't stain. Sometimes with a plastic Tupperware, you get that red residue that can remain on it after several washes. But for me, my storage of choice are these deli containers. If you get these, a lot of like takeout restaurants now have these. This is what a lot of the soup comes in. They come in 3 sizes. This is a pint, so this is 2 cups. This is a quart, so that's 4 cups. And then they come in the smaller one, which is a cup. But I use these for just about everything. I actually threw away all of my Tupperware once I started culinary school and found the magic of these delis. They're perfect for dry storage, for freezer, and for fridge. And they also are great for portion. This is the pint, but it's perfect when you can put like 1 portion of pasta and then you grab. They also stack amazingly well. And the biggest benefit that I would suggest for this, I don't suggest it, but the lids are the same for all of the sizes. So you don't have to worry about mixing and matching lids. Everything fits the same thing. They stack perfectly. I don't know how many of these I have. They're perfect for me.
That's awesome. So curious to tap into your culinary knowledge from cooking school. What would you pair this with for dessert? Any recommendations?
That's a great question. In my opinion, I love dessert. So I don't think there's a pairing that's like, oh, for marinara, I would go with this, or for pesto, I would go with this. I love pretty much any and everything chocolate. I like cakes. I like pies. I love ice cream. I personally, interestingly enough, part of my homework, my externship chef she's amazing, and she gives me homework, and I had to study biscotti and figure out a biscotti recipe to make for the entire kitchen staff as part of family meal. So that is something that I'm experimenting with a lot, and I've made a lot of versions of biscotti. Some were terrible, some I burned, some have been very good. But that is a really good, to me, it's like, you know, the Italian cookie can be a little bit hard. There's so many recipes out there, so many flavor profiles that you can do. But if I had to pick one, I would say ice cream. I'm a huge ice cream fan. I don't know if people are familiar with Salt and Straw, but that is I think it's nationwide. I think I saw one on the East Coast, but if not, it's ice cream. In my opinion, you can't go wrong with ice cream.
I love it. It was sort of a leading question on my end because we've had a bunch of classes in the past. So a plug for our cooking library, and actually one of our past teachers who's here, but we have had an ice cream class. So I just put it in the Zoom chat with Lucy. She also taught a New York style cheesecake, which I think would go well, but I'm not the culinary school grad. So I defer to you. And then Elaine is on this call, and she taught us how to make key lime pie. So I put that in there. So shout out to Elaine. So there's a few delicious options you can watch. And then Chris, you will be up on our cooking library soon as well. I want to do a quick check-in as we wrap up in the last few minutes to see how everyone is doing. Maybe you've eaten your dinner already. So I'm going to add a few of you back to the spotlight. If you want to kind of share any reflections or final questions with Chris, that would be awesome. So Dory, you're on. Alice, you're here. I'm pulling a few other folks up. Oh, Pete and Jen, this looks beautiful. You've added some bread. Did we make this bread from scratch? It looks awesome. Feel free to unmute y'all and let us know how it went and any final questions.
Julia, I forgot to mention, I can't believe I didn't mention this up front, but for those of age, a glass of wine while cooking pasta goes really well. I don't have one, but, or when you're finished.
Yeah, no, great call. And I saw our family that was cooking, I can't find them anymore, but they were all enjoying some red wine, I think. So, Pete and Jen are also, cheers to you all. Cool, great recommendation. Any Heidi and team, that looks awesome.
Thank you. I do have a question. I think we maybe made ours pretty thick and big. And it seems like it took them forever to cook. What am I really looking for? Like when I bite into one, it's still kind of like white in the middle.
Mhm.
Does that mean it's not really done yet? But it seems like they've been in there a really long time. And so I just kind of want to eat them and I'm giving up, but I don't want to overcook them because I know that everybody always says, oh, don't overcook your pasta. So like, how do I know really when they're right?
For me, it's about like mouthfeel, and it depends. Like I like a little bit of a bite in my pasta, so a little bit of al dente. So I'll try it. I should be able, like I can pick up one of my cavatellis, and it's not too flimsy. And for me, like I still have to bite and chew it a little bit. I really like my pasta that way. And then when I look on the inside, it's pretty uniform in color. I mean, the green, I took a bit of the pesto, but there's not like a center that you can see. If there is some discoloration, I would venture to guess that it probably still just isn't done yet. It should be uniform in color. But for me, I think the better indicator is just the taste and what you like. Some people like I don't judge on people how like their pasta. Some people like it al dente, some people like it more done and a little bit less chewy. And that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
I know when my family in the past has traveled to Italy in particular, we've gotten in trouble for returning the pasta because it's too hard for us Americans, and we get made fun of. But I hear you, Heidi. There's like this balance between when is it done and when is it too hard, too soft. Alice, do you want to let us know how it went on your end?
Yeah, I was doing a gluten-free recipe, so it's taking mine a little longer to cook, but yeah, I think it went pretty well for my first time.
How did your shapes turn out with gluten-free?
Good. I couldn't really do the braid because the gluten-free pasta wouldn't stretch, but I did a lot of these shapes.
Oh, nice. They look great.
Yeah, most of them have a good pinch in the middle. This one didn't come out super well, but yeah.
Yeah, I've had varying success with gluten-free pasta. I think for stuffed pastas, they work really well because you can, like you said, it doesn't stretch. I haven't been able to master that yet, but a lot of like raviolis and tortellinis and stuff those come out really well.
Awesome. Well done, Alice. We might recruit you to teach a future class if you're up for it.
Yes.
And that's actually a great call out as we kind of wrap up before I stop recording. If anyone is ever interested, we're all volunteer taught. So we've had a few of our former students here on the class who taught. And so all of you could be our future teachers. Just let us know. You can send us an email, cookingwithtradition@gmail.com, or send us a DM on Instagram. We always love everyone teaching and sharing. We're all a volunteer-led org, so we spend our time wanting to create community. So appreciate everyone joining us and contributing and participating. We are looking for future kitchen ambassadors. So if you want to help host classes like this, please also do let us know. And then I put in the chat, we have 3 upcoming classes that we are posted. We like to post pop-up style, which means we can surprise you with 2 weeks or 1 week notice, but here we're giving you a few weeks notice. So on the 21st of October, we're having Divya, who's teaching us how to make masala chai and rusk, which are tea toast. So we have an exciting Indian course. On the 23rd, we have our friend Ploy is coming to teach authentic Thai cooking, Thai coconut chicken and Thai salad. And then on the 29th, Rosh, who's been with us live from Melbourne, is back for like her 4th or 5th class. And she's teaching a dish that I do not want to mispronounce. It's a Alaska parul. Can you help me out with how to pronounce it? Is it sawak? If you're still here, if you know, I'm putting my friend Parul on the spot because she's always really helpful, but she might not be able to. She might need me to spell it for her in here. I'm going to put it in the chat if you know how to say it properly and or better than I do, or anyone else does. So Parul and Mom, we're tapping into your intelligence.
I'm so sorry, I was on mute. I think it's Sarawak Laska.
That sounds right.
That's my guess. So.
Okay. Thank you so much. Sorry to put you on the spot. Thank you to you and your mom. And Parul and her mom have taught with us. They actually kicked off our Indian trend last December, and ever since their course, we just had so many Indian dishes. So thank you, both of you.
No problem. That's help. It was fun.
All right, well, I am going to officially wrap us up, and we can ask any questions people might have off recording. But Chris, any final words of wisdom that you want to share with this group who's making it at home after this, watching the video?
I would just say, don't be intimidated. I think pasta, sometimes homemade pasta has a stigma of like, oh, it's very time intensive. I know we ran over a bit here today, but it's work with your hands, make some fun shapes. You can kind of play around, check it out on the internet, Google different shapes. There's a lot of different shapes you can make without any tools. And in my opinion, it's better than the box stuff. So if you've got 40 minutes, you can make some homemade pasta. Just keep playing around with it.
Yeah, I was really impressed, and I'm inspired definitely to try this next. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your talents with us. This was amazing to learn from you, and grateful for you. So thank you. We should give Chris a round of applause. Feel free to unmute or share your favorite emoji reaction and say thank you before we officially stop the recording.
Thank you everybody for cooking along and attending, and thank you, Julia.
So much.
Woo! We have, if you put it on gallery view, this is also quite fun. You can see all the applause. I love it. And the emojis. So very cool. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to stop recording. So anyone has any questions you don't want to ask on the recording, stick around, or just stick around and chat with Chris after hours.